GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulations, will be coming in on the 25th of May 2018. Lots of companies aren't really aware of it yet, but it's going to affect the way in which they manage their data and also the data of their people, of their supply chain and of their customers. So what are the implications for businesses? The first is that what is considered to be type of data. Under the Data Protection Act, certain aspects of data were included, but GDPR broadens that. It increases the size of what is considered to be data, and so we need to be careful about what we're capturing, where and when, on who. But also, and probably more importantly, the level of fine that can be imposed if it goes wrong is significantly increased. Up to 4% of global turnover, or £20 million, whichever is the greater, for a serious breach, or up to £10 million, or 2% of global turnover, whichever is the greater, for a minor breach. These are significant increases on the fines that have been seen so far. At the moment, organisations seem to be falling into two categories. Either they're trying to get in a significant data protection consultancy to go over everything that they have and to work out where the gaps are. But this is also going over ground that they don't need to because they're already strong and robust in those areas. Or they're sitting tight and hoping that actually the data protection that they already have in place and the cyber systems they already have in place are sufficient. And it seems that people aren't really sure whether there is something in between the two. And I think there can be. If we were to use and adapt the pressure test that we already do in Quirk Solutions and develop this, then there is a way of dipping your toe in the water to see how close you are to being compliant or not ahead of next May. How do you set up the war game to do that? Well, what we've done is recruited a pool of expertise in GDPR, whether that be from a law background, a HR background, or from data and cyber. And we put those onto the red team. So the organisation being tested would have their blue team talking about the policies and the processes that they have, how they are protecting themselves from breaches. And the red team, just in the same as a normal war game, would react to what they're being told. But the other interesting thing that we've seen some clients who've already gone through this process do is to use it to work out some of the questions that they already have. So if they're not sure about a particular part of the legislation or it's a bit of a grey area for them, then they're able to pose those questions back to the red team, to the experts sitting on the other side of the room, to say, well, what is this aspect? What is this part? How do we do this? What is your understanding of this? And that really helps to improve the depth of their understanding of the legislation as well as their preparedness for it. The other aspect that businesses are finding useful about running a pressure test or a GDPR war game is that they're able to start to work out whether they are a controller or a processor. And not just that, but whether people within their supply chain are controllers or processors, and where those relationships change as you go down through your supply chain and through the relationships that you have with partnerships, joint ventures, etc. Because all of these types of terminology and all of these types of relationships are important into what will be considered as mitigation should a breach happen. So running a GDPR war game or pressure test allows you to put yourselves forward and have that reality check, that sanity check on where you sit in the preparedness curve ahead of 25th of May next year. Are you broadly on track? Are you not? Is there a lot to do? Or is there just certain bits that you want to specifically get into and get into with a laser-like focus to deal with, making it much cheaper to do so? I'd urge anybody to get more involved in GDPR preparations, because regardless of what happens around Brexit, the EU legislation that is driven GDPR is going to come into effect next May. And the ICO, the Information Commission Office, has already said that even when we leave the EU, they will look to install a similar piece of legislation. So it's worthwhile getting on board with it now before you could end up with a very costly fine. And we're here to help people do that.